Okay, good morning. This week we read about scientists. Are you guys the group? Did we talk about science and magic? About how they sort of both want to do the same thing, they want to control. I mean, and when I say science, I don't mean the kind of science that just wants to find things out because it brings glory to God and you're curious, but science that we want to use, you know, that we want to, like technology, applied science. So we read all about both kinds, really, because, is space exploration just knowledge out of curiosity? Or is it applied? Is it practical? Is it something we do for a purpose? What do you think?
I think it can be both, because we're curious about like what's out there and we want to know. That's just our human nature. But then we use that.
Yeah.
I think back to like the Great Space Race when it all started.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it was everyone thought it could be used to get an upper hand on the other, and then, but at the same time, I think it could definitely be like, I wonder what's out there.
Yeah.
We have like satellites and stuff that we use like in space, and we use that. And don't we use it to like study the human body, like in space?
Oh, yes, and that's kind of curious. Well, it depends on if you think that we can ever colonize other planets or.
Like, are they doing it because of global warming?
In science fiction, they do it because there's something bad happens here, or was that WALL-E where they just had junk everywhere?
Yeah.
Okay. I fell asleep while I was watching WALL-E, so I'm never quite sure.
I guess in Interstellar.
Oh yes.
Yeah, is it the Great Depression? Like, I forgot what it was, and they tried to.
Yeah, it was a dust bowl. It was they'd ruined the earth, and they were trying. Yes. So I guess it depends, but science can be both. And by the way, I'm not saying that we shouldn't use science for anything. Like, I'm not implying that I don't like furnaces and air conditioners. I do like them. Let's take a look at some great scientists, but I have to correct, and I might have done it with this class, but I just want to make sure everybody gets this message. I'm going to correct Mrs. Mills. In the very beginning, and she says this twice in this chapter, which kind of irritates me. During the Middle Ages, there had been many workers whose experiments and beliefs had been a curious mixture of superstition and magic. Men who were seeking the philosopher's stone, others who sought through astrology to foretell the future from the stars. But in the 13th century, there were other forces at work. Scientific thinking and methods were influenced by Roger Bacon. All through the Middle Ages, the Arabs had made notable contributions to science. But she says, but the period of the Middle Ages was not one in which great progress was made in scientific knowledge. Now, from a certain perspective, that last sentence is true, but I dispute. The Middle Ages was not an era of magic and superstition. The Renaissance was an era of magic and superstition. That's when we have alchemists running around. Now, I know in the Chaucer storybook we met an alchemist. It existed. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but yes. And I don't know what to do with I don't know what King Arthur. Do you know? I mean, it's just beyond. I don't know. But there was an uptick in, like, can you call it magical research? Like trying harder and harder. I think a lot of people get this idea about the Middle Ages, and we're talking about between 800 and 1100 or 800 and 1200, because people were very religious. And if you're not a Christian and you meet a very religious person, you call it superstition. Do you see what I mean? And so the modern world looks back at people praying and believing in miraculous healings and things like that. They call that superstition, but it's really not. It's Christianity.
Then why would we call it? Why wouldn't she call it religion? Why would she call it?
Well, I'm not saying she is doing this. I'm saying that people who, she's just part of a larger worldview that looks back at the Middle Ages as a time of superstition. All right? And I'm not saying she's not even a Christian. I'm just saying there's a popular idea of the Middle Ages as being a time when everybody is just whacked out, superstitious, crazy, unintelligent. And I just don't want you guys to get the impression that that's what people were like in the Middle Ages. But it is true that they weren't spending a lot of time, they weren't experimenting. Do you remember, we talked about Roger Bacon in the previous book, the guy who said, you know what, I think a way to know things is to experiment, is to actually put it in front of you and see what happens if you mix these two things together, or you cut this open, what's inside. I'm going to experiment. And, you know, put the, this was much later, this wasn't a Roger Bacon experiment, but put the meat in a container and see if flies actually spring out of rotting meat. Oh, no, they don't. If you put it in a container, flies can't lay their eggs. So they,
How dumb would that make people be able to know that for so long?
they thought
They
that
just
was
left
true.
it out? Yeah.
But you know what? And maybe that's why we think, oh, those people were so silly, they didn't know. But if you see rotten meat, and every time you see rotten meat, then in a few days it's got fly larvae crawling around on it. I know, I'm sorry, but
Why would
then you would think that, wouldn't you? I mean, that makes sense. Look, rotting meat, fly larvae, they always go together. I think rotting meat produces worms.
Why would they make why would they let their meat rot though? Why would they put
There
it
was
in
no refrigeration, and they didn't know.
that it was bad? Like they knew that it rotted and it was out for a long time, right? It just
No,
like animals.
but okay, where are you going to? There's no refrigeration, and it doesn't. They didn't know that keeping it in a container kept it from anything. They didn't know.
But they know that like bodies that are dead and like animals that are dead, they will eventually rot.
Yeah, well, you know what? Our standards are a lot higher than theirs were for our food. I'm sorry. When you're hungry, you'll eat stuff. You know what I mean? You leave it around for a while. Do you remember in Robin Hood how people were always carrying meat pies and stuff around in a pouch? Like stuff that I would refrigerate. Let's go on the other side of the hedge and get out my, hunk of meat. Oh my gosh, how long have you been carrying that meat around in a pouch? Don't eat it. But apparently they weren't all dying of food poisoning. Anyway, I just wanted to, I'm not saying that there was no superstition in the Middle Ages. And I'm not saying science didn't blossom in the Renaissance. But I am saying that idea that everybody was a superstitious idiot in the Middle Ages and suddenly they got really, really smart and scientific in the Renaissance isn't really true. Okay, I've gone on and on about that long enough. So, our first scientist is not somebody we consider usually a scientist. Leonardo da Vinci. He revisits our class. First, he was a painter, but what did he do with his time besides paint? That was your first question. That's a pretty catch-all answer, everything. Give me an example. Mariana.
I'm not exactly sure if he ended up doing this stuff, but it says he wanted to, he sculpted and planned and designed buildings and built bridges.
He did.
He was a sculptor.
He was a sculptor.
He
He,
did, like math and philosophy, right?
he did.
Astronomy.
Yes. So everything. Yeah, Andrew's sticking with his everything. Here, Dorothy Mills says, Leonardo recognized the greatness of Aristotle as a philosopher and a teacher, but Aristotle did not show him how to draw the human body in its right proportions, or give him the power to train his eye, so that he could transfer to his canvas all their grace of movement, the birds he saw flying across the sky. To do these things, Leonardo must study anatomy and physiology and optics, and he set himself to do it. It was the same with all his ambitions. To build houses or bridges, he must know the principles of mechanics and of physics, and in this too he succeeded. this is a clue as to why he didn't really paint that many paintings. And we have a lot of things he started but didn't finish, because if you want to do that many things, you really leave things undone. I have a book of the sketchbooks of Leonardo da Vinci book, which I'm sorry for Maya and Natalie, maybe I'll try to remember to bring this back again next time. And so this is this famous picture that went out in space. Actually, we sent this out with Voyager, whatever, in the late 1970s. We sent a satellite, not a satellite, because satellites orbit. We sent a spaceship out to leave the solar system, and it's emitting signals. And anyway, so a study of man and the proportions of lengths of arms, lengths of legs. What?
Like for aliens to know what we look
Yeah. It is. It is for aliens to know what we look like, in case there are any out
Wait,
there.
we spent millions of dollars.
Oh, we spent
or
millions of it.
billions
Oh, we're still spending it, Addison.
just for aliens?
Oh, yeah.
We don't know this.
Yeah. And of course, it doesn't send messages back to us anymore, because this was when I was a kid that we sent it out. I remember them saying the year that they said, oh, Voyager should now be leaving the solar system. Like, yay. Good for it. And they put stuff on board, like a time capsule sort of, this like stuff. And it's playing Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, I think, so they can have a little sample of human culture.
Maybe that's what people listen to now.
Well, but it's
Or even in
It's-
1970s.
exhibits the most beautiful things we have produced. Leonardo da Vinci wasn't alive anymore either in the 70s, but they chose the most beautiful things, not representative. Because anything representative of your time is dated. Do you know what I mean? But something that's beautiful lasts forever. Yeah. Go ahead.
It would have to go out with the galaxy, right?
I'm
I don't know. Do they think there are other habitable planets in the Milky Way galaxy?
Is it ever going to come back to Earth?
No.
Well,
Okay,
the-
I'm still caught on the fact that our government spent millions of dollars
But
yeah,
for
like,
speculation.
yeah, and we still do. They have telescopes looking for signals.
We still do. They ever run out of power?
What that? Yeah, it doesn't need to, because it just
Oh,
will
yeah,
keep
there's-
going in the same line
Oh, no air.
unless something stops it.
It would be like.
If it runs into a meteorite or an asteroid or something, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they swung it. They swung it around the sun to use the sun, and to fling it, to give it extra power.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How they do, and then just bye. See ya. I hope I'm telling you accurately. I think it's called Voyager. I do know we sent out a spaceship, and it had the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and it had the picture by Leonardo da Vinci. I don't know what else was in it. I'm sure you can Google Voyager at home and find out. I never know what we're going to talk about at least once. I have to cryogenically put them to sleep. Okay, so anyway, the beginning of this book about Leonardo da Vinci is his artwork and paintings that we looked at, but we have a bunch of other, and I just flagged some things that I thought were interesting. Okay, it goes, there's just pages and pages and pages of machines and anatomy sketches. It just goes on and on and on. But I thought this was interesting. It says one of these is a instrument for draining canals that he was designing. And this is a study of a volcanic eruption, like the stages of a volcanic eruption. Okay. Can I do that? It's not going to show up very well. Ladies, can you both see at the same time? Just hundreds of pages of, because he's curious about everything. And he wants to draw it. Now, I put this, this is, you might know this already, but Leonardo da Vinci is famous for the fact that the notes in his notebook are all written backwards.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah.
So here's a page of his writing. He writes backwards. And sometimes people say, I'm going to try this.
Wow.
Sometimes people say it's because he didn't want anybody to know his secrets, but actually, as far as we can tell, he didn't care about anybody knowing his secrets. He was right-handed, and so do you know that when you write, you know this. So you're writing, and your hand. How would that work? So you're writing like
Oh, wait,
this.
was he-
So your hand would, how?
You would go
Because
that
if you would go like that, it would be in front. Your writing would be in front of you, and you could see what you're doing. And also there'd be less danger. I was thinking of you dragging your hand through the ink.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't drag your hand through the ink like this.
Well, if you go
I
like,
thought he was left-handed.
Was he
I
left-handed?
thought so.
I have a book here.
Did he like write the words backwards, or did he just wrote the words in order backwards?
Like,
No, he just wrote the words in order backwards. Okay, we're gonna solve this mystery. I really thought that it was because he didn't want to drag his hand through. Oh, what are the chances of my finding the information in this book? Probably 0. I'm sure it's in here.
Wait, so did he write the letter?
So he wrote the
No,
words
no,
instead
he
of,
just
like,
wrote the words. Yeah,
I just want to see that.
no, the letters are backwards.
Okay.
Okay, hang on. We gotta know. We're hungry for knowledge, and we need to know.
So you like put it in
Um,
here and those. Some here.
Hang on. They gotta say something about it. Because it would be in the chapter called his notebooks. Everybody hang on. Ooh. Oh, one of the notebooks, it says, made headlines in recent years for the sensational auctions in which it has changed hands twice, bringing it to the U.S. Purchased in 1980 by an oil millionaire, and then bought in 1994 by Bill Gates. Okay, now they're telling us about the particular notebooks, but they're not explaining his writing. All right, I didn't do my homework, so we're going to have to look into this. All right. We'll look, if we stop early, I'll look it up, and if not, I'll try to look it up and inform you. Here are some of his anatomy studies. Of how your muscles are in different positions, what happens when you move your arms, because remember
Do we
he,
know if they were all accurate?
oh yeah, they're very, because he was one of the first people who dissected bodies. Okay, so he could find out what was inside, so he could find out what the,
I would not.
no, it's very, it's not, I wouldn't want to do it, but
It
it's
would be
important
fine
for
to,
medicine.
like,
Okay,
It's important, but I would not want to.
here's some skeletal studies.
Wow.
I know, it's amazing.
He's
It's,
just got,
oh, I'm sorry, did I take it away too
No.
fast? I'm sorry, I know this is a whirlwind.
he's like so good in like everything.
How? Like, he's just like, never mind.
He's weird.
No, I mean, they find skeletons, and you can skeletonize someone, you know, okay, I don't want to, we're not going to talk about that anymore.
I'm not actually gonna go, but it's like.
Okay. Lungs and heart. Of course, he doesn't need to know this to draw a human person. Do you know what I mean? He just wants to know.
I do not want to know anything about That's like the.
Yes,
Well,
they-
but we're happy that there are people who do
Well,
know.
yeah, yeah, I know, but like to me, it's just.
Okay, this is interesting. He's even got a baby, like in uterus. Like,
How does he know that?
I know,
well,
that's what I was just-
maybe a pregnant lady died. Don't know. I don't know your answer. Okay, then he's famous for experimenting with flying machines. Yeah, I think I could make a machine that could fly. Something that looks very much like a helicopter.
He just did everything. That's so cool.
Yes. Here's some of his famous.
I just want to do this. Just be like so smart and know everything, like on every subject.
Yes.
Like at least have some sort of knowledge on that.
Yeah.
And then we mentioned, Mariana, you mentioned, designing buildings. That here is a building he designed, and here's a 3D model of what, it's not a building that's actually been built.
Oh,
This is just what it would look like if it were built. It's gorgeous.
why didn't you build it?
I don't know.
Just like
And why didn't he do a bunch of stuff? Because he was doing something else.
Why would he just build a
Step it
building?
up.
Because he was interested in
No, I mean,
design.
like Jack. Like,
Oh,
why would he just
oh,
build
oh.
for no reason?
Because you have to be hired. I think your question is, why would he bother to design a building
That he's not
that
gonna
no
build.
one was going to build?
Yeah.
Because he could.
Someone should build that now. That'd be cool.
And I'm just showing you a sample. All right, there, like I said, there's pages, like anatomy, other buildings, pillars, just sketches of solids, geometrical sketches. The guy just went on and on
He's smarter
and
than
on.
us.
Oh, I loved this. This is a study of the phases of the moon. Like every day he drew.
He didn't seem like he had
His
much
days-
of a social life.
I don't think he had much of a social life. I feel like I read a biography about Da Vinci once, and he was kind of,
He must have like his days
Grumpy.
must have been so packed to just do everything.
of course, if that was your job, I mean, he has patrons, he has people who pay him to be an artist, and so that was his job, but that was also his hobby. It was his life. If you love something, it's not hard to spend all your time doing it. Do you know what I mean? To us, like if you're not into sketching or designing buildings and flying machines, I'm like, oh man, that must take a lot of time. But think about something that you really love doing and how a day could just disappear for you
Someone
doing that.
do like so much that you don't even like have friends. Like that'd be scary.
That would be, I don't know that he didn't have friends. And remember, you know what? This is me like turning into mom and preaching at you, but we have, actually I'm preaching to myself too. We have a lot of things to distract us. He lived in a world with no television, no computer, no radio, no movies, no phones. Do you see? Imagine how much time you could come up with if you cut all that stuff out of your life. I'm not telling you cut all that stuff out of your life. I'm just saying, think of the time that we squander. Think about this. The time that it took you to get in the car and drive here, and the time it will take you to drive home. You isn't traveling in a car every day. Think of people that might lose an hour every day out of their lives just going back and forth to work. And in that hour, Leonardo da Vinci was, I don't know, designing a building or a helicopter. He's an amazing man, but a really
Is he
good.
smarter than Albert Einstein?
I don't know that there's I don't know that we can, I don't know.
I
He
mean,
was
did way more
obviously
stuff.
very smart,
I see him as a smart person.
possibly. That would be a hard contest to judge, wouldn't it? Because we have different areas of expertise or interest, and it's hard to compare
He
them.
had everything.
I see it as overall. I feel like he would have.
Albert Einstein was really like math, right?
Yeah.
In
Da
physics,
Vinci-
yeah, math, I guess
yeah.
physics is math, so.
Da Vinci did everything.
And she did everything. We don't know that Albert Einstein was painting murals and mixing paints.
Especially here.
Well, we're not going to go there. How about instead of Einstein? Oh, actually, we had one more question about Da Vinci. According to him, what is the mother of stupidity? Impatience. Are you all impatient to give me the answer? No. Impatience. No. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, if you're impatient, then you don't think about things, and then you just say dumb things. I have a problem with that.
If you're impatient, you're stupid.
We all do.
If you're impatient, you're always in a rush, which could cause more mistakes.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. What Dorothy Mills says before that sentence. He also had the patience of the scientific mind. To Leonardo, shortcuts did only harm. because, so my husband and I went to Chicago this last weekend because it was our son's birthday. And my husband likes to try new routes, which is totally fine. But sometimes the routes don't go where you think. And he said, it wasn't a new route to Chicago. It was just a new route to get from our house to Interstate 80. And he said, we're going to try a new. I said, shortcuts make long delays, which they say. But he said, not this time. I looked it up on, he had it mapped out. And actually, the road was not great, but it got us there. It was supposed to be 5 miles shorter or something. Anyway, it was fine. We made it. But it does sometimes happen that when one wants to hurry or you're impatient for the result, you botch it, and then you have to go back and do it again.
That's
Does this ever happen?
It's the classic storyline in a movie. They're trying to get somewhere, let's take a shortcut, and then they get lost.
And then without that, there would be no movie. It would be so boring.
For me,
You like to get down and consider everything about that.
That's boring.
like when I think about this, I think about talking and things that I say, because a lot of times, like this is a major problem for me. I'll say things that just come to my head, and then it's like I don't even think about it, and then it's like the dumbest thing ever, or defend someone. So
Well, if it makes you feel any better, that is welcome to the human race, because I feel like everybody I've ever met and everybody in this room has probably at some point blurted something out, and then you wished you really hadn't said that, and you didn't even realize. I'm like, oh shoot, I can't believe I said that to them. Okay, so Leonardo da Vinci. The next question was about Copernicus. What was his revolutionary, oh, that's kind of a joke, revolutionary belief? Yes, Mariana.
It was that Earth is not the center of the universe, but one of many planets that revolve around the sun.
That the sun is in the center of the solar system, not the Earth. Yes.
So what I was, something that I thought when I read this was like, they kept on trying to protect the belief that it was the center of the universe, because that was like what they thought was biblical. And honestly, what he said, but he said like, Elijah did not tell the
Martin Luther said yes.
Yeah, that did not tell the earth to stop moving, but the sun, which honestly it makes sense. Like, it's a good argument, but like we know that it's not true. But like still, and I wrote down like, people, if we really believe that the gospel is true, then we shouldn't have to fear discovery, because we don't have to protect it. Like we don't have to defend the gospel. Like God is all powerful and all knowing.
Yes.
We don't have to like stop people from discovering and fear that it's going to contradict His creation.
I agree. We also need to remember that we even today say sunrise and sunset. Do you see? Because even though technically it's not, what are we going to call it? Earth turn? Morning Earth turn and evening Earth turn?
I like that.
Let's start calling it. No, we don't, because from our perspective, the sun comes up and the sun goes down. And so even it's not stupid to view the world that way. In a sense, it doesn't really matter. I hate to say it that way. But for the average person, if you're not going out into space, or you're not jettisoning, pictures of Da Vinci and Beethoven symphonies out to the aliens, you don't really care. And I'm not saying it's not, like, it's completely legitimate to explore the universe because we're curious, because God, it says the heavens declare the glory of God, right? In the Psalms. But if you really want to know most accurately what is happening, if that's your interest in science, then Copernicus found an easier way to explain it. So Ptolemy was a Greek astronomer and philosopher, and he's the one who came up with the system that they used all through the Middle Ages. All right, the idea that the Earth is in the middle. And I want to explain this just a little. Well, we talked about this maybe a little bit. Did we talk about the spheres? The spinning of the spheres last semester? I'm sorry, I always have to ask you guys that, but I'm gonna mention it. If you say, oh yeah, I remember what you're talking about, I'll cut it short. But the idea, it was a very elaborate system. And what scientists wanted to do was called saving the appearances. And what they meant by that was to put a system in place that everything that appears, everything you view, is explained. And of course, we know that, so you guys, I'm sure, maybe you're into stargazers, maybe you're not, maybe you've studied some astronomy, maybe not, but I'm sure you've noticed that at night, particular stars move across the sky every night, all right? And it's not the same star, different stars in the summer and different stars in the winter. We know this now because the Earth is tipped, and as it goes around the sun, it's facing different constellations. But if you look, if you go out, if you can identify a constellation, in the winter, Orion is a good one. I think it's probably getting ready to set for the summer soon because it's got 3 stars in a row on his belt. And you watch, and you go out a few hours later, and it's moved. And you go out, and it's moved. And it's moved. And they do that every night. But there are some stars that move in differently. They don't stay with the rest of the stars. So here's the constellations, and they're moving. And then I have this star, and wait a minute, this star rose, and at this time of night, it's here. Last night, this star was here, but tonight it's here. What's up with that star? So they called them planets. And planet means wanderer. It's a wandering star. It doesn't go, it doesn't match the rest of the stars. So, go ahead.
It's not dumb. Like,
No, it's not dumb at all.
They had no reason to think that the world was round.
Well, they knew their world was round. The Greeks knew the world was round. That
Yeah,
is
the Greeks
that
were brilliant.
that is an illusion. Every educated person in the Middle Ages knew the world was round. Yeah, it was just the most uneducated peasants thought the world was flat. That wasn't a thing. That's just one of our things we think is true. No, they all knew. Every educated person knew the world was round. But so here's the. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. You finish.
So it was just that they thought that it was in the center of the universe?
Yeah, that everything went around it.
Well, that's not dumb either.
Yeah. So here's the model they had. So they had the Earth, okay, and then the moon obviously is closest to us because it moves so fast you can watch it moving. Do you know what I mean? You can watch the moon. You go out half an hour later and it's higher. They knew it must be close. So there's the Earth and then there's the moon. And they thought there were, now this is where it gets weird for us, but it's not unreasonable, okay? They believed there were transparent spheres. So you know how nesting dolls work? How you have a tiny doll inside a bigger doll and a bigger doll and a bigger doll, or we have toys like that? They thought the spheres were like that. So you have the Earth, and then you have the sphere of the moon, and the sphere of Venus, and the sphere of Mars, and they thought that it was attached to the sphere, and so the sphere was turning. There was this invisible ball around us that was turning, and the moon was a part of it. Okay, and then outside it, there's another invisible sphere, and the Venus is a part of that. And outside there's Mars, and there's Jupiter, and there's Saturn, and then you get out as far as you can, and there's a sphere that all the stars are on. That's the celestial sphere, the stars. And then outside of that is heaven, is God. And so I'm giving you guys too much information, but Aristotle, not a Christian, Greek philosopher, but he had this idea of these spheres. And he said, outside, what makes them turn? Why do they turn? Nothing happens without a cause. So outside it, there must be a mover. And nothing moves him. He moves himself. He's the unmoved mover. We would say that is God. God puts everything in motion. So when in Middle Ages, they are Christian. It's God. God is outside, and he makes the whole thing move. And now this, okay. Should I do it? I'm going to do it. Yeah, I'll do it. So do you remember we talked about Dante, the Italian poet who wrote a poem actually in Italian instead of Latin? And at the very end, so he gets to go through all the spheres in his poem. And he goes out and he gets a vision of God in this dream, in this, whatever it is he experiences. outside of it. And his poem ends with the line that mover, God, is controlling everything by the love that moves the sun and other stars. And you read that, it's like, oh, God loves the universe and he's moving it. It's not what the medievals believed. They believed they moved because they loved God. And it just, like, what? Like a dog runs to you because he loves you? That the stars and the planets, that even things that don't have consciousness, like we would say, love their creator. And they move because they love him. Which is just gives me goosebumps, kind of, just to think of the whole universe in motion because it loves God so much. So they had this system, and they believed that as these spheres turned, it produced a music. And a music that the angels could hear, but that if we weren't fallen, we could hear it too. But that just like our eyes are blinded by sin, and we think that good things are bad and bad things are good because we're screwed up because of sin, that our ears are screwed up and we can't hear the music anymore. And you guys may know a hymn, especially maybe not in Catholic churches, but Protestant churches. This is my Father's world. Do you know that hymn? This is my Father's world. Protestant churches don't sing hymns anymore. Anyway, there's a line that says, the heaven sings and round me rings the music of the spheres. The music of the spheres. It's what it means. So anyway, that's the Ptolemaic system. This was a big lecture, I'm sorry. But it's kind of cool. So we have these spheres, and Copernicus comes in. I guess it helps you understand how everybody was like, what? What's with the, no spheres? What?
It's kind of like what it is, like it's a circle, it's all circle. Like it goes around, the Earth is not in the middle, the sun is, and everything goes around.
And it was Kepler who found out it's not in a circle. Do you know what I mean? That it's ellipses, in elliptical orbits. But so Copernicus, it said, you know what? If we organize it like this, like my way, it explains the planets. It explains the wandering better than the old model. Now, because I'm presuming we won't discover that the solar system is other than we think it to be now, because we've traveled in it. Like we've actually sent things and we've tested it. But conceivably, if we hadn't, then somebody else could come along and say, yeah, but this system fits it even better than Copernicus's system. I don't think that's going to happen because we've gone out and explored it. I mean, if we hadn't, it could be. So, so Copernicus said the sun is in the middle, the earth is in the middle. Now, I'm going to disagree with Mrs. Mills one more time. All right. I have a lot of hubris to disagree with her. The teaching of Copernicus did something else. Both the medieval church and the reformers gave to man the most important place in a world which had been created for him, and this new theory seemed to affect the position of man, for his world was no longer the center of the universe. That's not completely really true. Go back to the spheres. Picture you live in a world with the spheres, all right? And you're in the middle, and the moon sphere is outside of you. They thought the real important place was on the outside of it all, where God was. So picture yourself on a summer night, and you go outside, and you look at the stars. You've all done it. Has everyone been outside at night and looked at the stars? Yes. What do you think? That's an unanswerable question. Does it feel like you're looking out into space? Like I'm here and look at the reaches of space. I'm looking, it's out there. I wonder what's out there. Do you get the feeling? I mean, John's like, yeah, no, I don't think that. Like I'm here in my cozy little Earth, and I'm looking out at the vast reaches of the universe. Amazing. When medieval people looked at the sky, they weren't looking out, they were looking in. It was like it was turned inside out. They care where God is. They're on the outside. We're out of the loop. Sin, has botched the earth. And they believed that everything above the moon was perfect. And that below the moon was marred by sin. So they didn't think of themselves, it wasn't, I'm so important, I'm a human being, and I'm the center of the universe. It was, oh, we're the people who are the outcasts because we live in the sinful place. But out there, that's the glory of God. And I'm looking in. Go ahead, say what you want to say, Addison.
So, like, they didn't think at all, because it said, what she quoted Martin Luther, where it said that they thought that it was.
Okay, so you're talking literal and I'm talking metaphorical. Okay, I'm talking in a metaphor now.
They were talking about like their spiritual.
Yes, spiritually. They believed that physically the Earth was in the center of the solar system. Spiritually, it's on the outer reaches of everything that exists.
But then they believe that because they believe, like, I mean, why else would, like, why not? Is that what they believe? Like, just because?
What? But that the Earth was in the middle?
Yeah.
Well, because Ptolemy had made a model that it matched everything they saw, the planets and the stars and everything. But now that we know the Earth is not the center of the universe, the center of the solar system, we kind of have a group of people that act like it is. We're arrogant, like we're the center of everything, like we're the most important thing in the universe. No, the medievals were truer. Like out there, God, and I'm not saying God is necessarily like you could travel beyond the stars and there's God. I'm not, this is not literal at all, okay? But they understood, they physically thought we were in the center, but they spiritually thought we were on the outskirts of all that is truly important. Now, we don't believe we're physically at the center, but we act like we are. Like man is everything. Like man is the... Yeah, yes, we are, as far as we know, the only sentient till somebody intercepts, Beethoven and Da Vinci's picture. But do you understand? I might be... I don't know if I'm getting too complicated here and philosophical, and I apologize if so, but we have this idea that people of the past thought they were the be-all and end-all of the universe, and that we know better, we're not important. But actually medieval people were very sane as far as that. Yeah, we're the outcast sinners. Our planet is the sinful. We messed it up. But out there they still move because they love God. And we do the opposite. We say we're not at the center, but we don't need a God to tell us what to do. We can make our own decisions. We, all that superstition and nonsense that the church teaches, we don't need that. I'm not saying people in this room say that. I'm saying our world says that. Yeah, go ahead.
That didn't change. Like, that, people still thought, like, there's always been sin nature that says we don't need God.
Yes.
Not like
This is true. But the general world view, do you know what I mean? How they viewed their universe. So revolutionary because some people don't like change more than anything. It's hard. Can you imagine? Well, I guess it must have been like that when Columbus came back. Oh, except he didn't know where he'd been. When the first person went who figured out where they'd been, whoever that was, and said, yeah, that's not the Indies. That's a whole new place. Like, what? There's a whole new place on the other side of the world? With people? It must have been just mind-blowing, if you think about it. And the only thing I can compare it to would be if we discovered intelligent life on another planet. It would just completely, what? that would blow everybody away. That's why there's so many movies about it. You know what I mean? Because it kind of makes a cool movie because they got cool ships, you know. But also the fact that it just blows everybody away when they find out they're not alone. I guess it must be like that would feel. Anyway, I'm sorry. We went on. Next thing I asked you was, oh yeah, I didn't ask you about Kepler at all, did I? So we already talked about Kepler, though. Kepler was a mathematician. He earned his living in what seems an astonishing way for a serious astronomer, as he was the editor of an almanac of astrological predictions. He did astrology for people. And we forget that the same people, remember I told you Sir Isaac Newton was into alchemy? The same people, because they're flip sides of the coin, right? Astrology, the stars dictate our fate? Sure, maybe. I'm also studying, and I just figured out that all the planets orbit in an elliptical orbit, because I'm a brilliant mathematician. I'm okay with doing both of these things. I don't see how they interfere with each other. Kind of interesting. We remember them for the one because it works. Astrology doesn't really work. You know, get two people born at exactly the same time and follow their lives, and I don't think their lives are going to be exactly the same. I feel they're not going to be. All right, let's move on to Galileo. All right, what instrument did Galileo make extensive use of? Telescope. He didn't invent the telescope, but he got a hold of the guy who did, and he refined the lenses and made his own telescope that was even better than the one the other guy had made. And he started actually looking at things. And he looked at the moon, and he realized the moon is all pitted and marred from meteorites, asteroids. And then he looked at other planets, and he was the first one to see the moons going around Jupiter. Like, wait a minute. They have moons? Something goes around them like our moon goes around us? It was amazing.
I hope that in heaven we'll be able to see all the new developments and stuff. Cause I just wish that I could see what's gonna happen, like at the end, to see how far our technology that gets.
Maybe when you get to heaven, you'll just we won't all ever automatically know everything, because then we'd be God. But maybe we will become aware of things not through traditional means. Kind of like Jesus knew that Nathaniel was under the fig tree, you know, and he said, there is a true Israelite in whom is nothing. Not Nathaniel. Philip and Andrew. Oh, I got my disciples mixed up. Sorry, I got my disciples mixed up. You know what I'm saying, the story. One of the disciples met Jesus, and he called his brother. You've got to meet him. I think this is the one who was promised. And he came, and Jesus said, behold, a true Israelite, in whom there is nothing false. And he said, well, how do you know me? He says, when you were sitting under the fig tree, I saw you. Maybe we'll be like that. I hope so, Addison. So Galileo. Galileo's discoveries with his telescope did not fit into any of the old theories. On the other hand, they seemed to upset them, and so they were looked on as so dangerous that some people declined even to find out what they were. Now, here, what is... Had we all heard of Galileo before we read this? What do you think of when I say the word Galileo? Hopefully maybe telescope, but is there anything else you think of automatically?
Well, I have a report on it.
Oh, awesome. Inform us, Andrew. Oh.
But he wasn't put in jail for all this stuff. That's what I think of.
He was, that is what most people think of. I want to talk about that. I'm going to read you what Dorothy Mills says, and then I'm going to editorialize on it. In 1633, the Inquisition, which had just declared that anything that was contrary to the Bible was heretical and false, summoned Galileo to Rome to give an account of his beliefs, which were said to be contrary to what was taught in the Bible. It is said that threatened with torture if he did not recant, he recanted. The tradition has been handed down, however, that he muttered to himself afterwards, "But it does move, the earth. But it does move." All right. He was not put in prison. He was put in house arrest, basically, for the rest of his life. Now, I want to talk about this for a minute, because like the Inquisition, this is the other thing that people who argue against the truths of Christianity use. Well, look at Galileo. Christians always hate knowledge. Christians are ignorant. Look what they did to Galileo. Yes, Addison, would you like to interject?
The next question is, why were Galileo's discovery once and only
Oh, yes. Yeah, go ahead and do that. Yes, go ahead and answer it.
It was set in the whole system of scholasticism.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, this kind of was what I said in
Copernicus.
Yeah. They were afraid that God's creation was going to contradict his gospel.
Yes. So, as we talked about earlier, it appears that we are still in the things move, and the Bible talks the sun standing still over Gibeon. And Galileo upset the apple cart when he saw moons going around other planets. When we thought this was a perfect system out there, and it's much more complicated than we thought. And then he sees the moon, and the moon has damage on it. And wait a minute, we thought everything at moon level and up was perfect. And so people accuse the church of ignorance and being anti-science. And of course, now I happen, you can discuss this, well, I won't tell you how I feel. Christians have varying levels of understanding of whether or not evolution was used by God to create, all right? You discuss this with your parents. But whenever one argues as a Christian against just atheistic evolution, no matter what you think actually happened. Like, see, you Christians are all anti-science. You Galileo. Okay. Galileo was totally allowed to say whatever he wanted if he called it a theory. The church did not say, you can't say that. The church said, you can't teach that as fact, because we don't know yet that it is fact. And he refused. And they gave him a chance. They said, you know what? We will let you write a dialogue, an imaginary conversation between, various people, and show all sides of the issue. Show all views. And he did, and he made the person who argued against him, he gave him a name, I can't remember what it was, but it was something like idiot or ignoramus or something like that, something that meant you're stupid, the person who argued for the other side. I mean, he rubbed their noses in it, as they say, by writing this dialogue. It's like, I'll write a dialogue, take that, you idiots. This is what got Galileo in trouble. Saying, oh no, it's a fact. And you know what? A lot of what Galileo thought was going on, we know now is wrong. Like, he wasn't totally accurate. Some stuff he said, it's a fact. We know now it's not a fact. He refused to say, theoretically, it could be like this. That's why he got put under house arrest. Now, I'm not saying the church should have the power to do. I'm not saying, yay, let's imprison people. But all he had to do was say, I have this theory, and I think it could be true. That's all he had to do. He wouldn't do it. Does that make sense? So the Galileo story that you get told is not really the whole Galileo story. It always makes him sound like a saint and like he's wonderful, and the church sound all mean. And all they said was, you know what? Can you call it a theory? Can you not say it's a fact? He says, no, I can't say that. Yes, Addison.
I mean, did he work for the church? Or
No.
was he teaching the church?
No.
So then, why did they have the authority to, why was it not the government even,
Because-
they offered to torture.
I'll torture you if you like. I offered.
They threatened to torture him. Like, it's not like they just said, "Can you call it?" But even if they did it originally, they did threaten to torture him, and then they put him on the house.
This is true. No, I'm not saying I'm good with all of it. I'm saying from a scientific viewpoint, Galileo wasn't necessarily all right, and he had a chance. It wasn't that the church didn't want any scientific knowledge leaking out. That's not true. Also remember, this is a time when the whole church and state thing isn't the way we think of it today. All right. It's starting to be. By the time of Galileo, we have countries that have decided to be Catholic and countries that have decided to be Protestant, but it's still your country decides, or your city decides, or your local duke decides we will be Catholic or we will be Protestant. You don't decide, because they just didn't have a concept of how could the world run if everybody just did whatever the heck they wanted to. As far as belief goes. But from today's viewpoint, certainly, Addison, I would agree with you that you would say, well, how is that their business? I think, though, that maybe science is more of the business of the church than we think, because you said it earlier. What if all truth is God's truth, and God's in charge of everything, we have no reason to be afraid, but we should stand up when we see people interpreting facts wrongly, because we see the same facts, but we get different interpretations of them, right? Okay, thank you for listening to me go on and on about that. So next week, actually, we don't meet next week. Next week is our spring break. I will send your parents an email. I will send them an email this afternoon, okay, reminding them of this. What's your...
So do we get 2 more weeks on this essay before we have to turn it in?
Yeah. Yeah, that was poor planning on my part. I'll ask for questions on that in a minute. So you are not reading extra that I would normally not have you do in 1 week? Does that make sense? I'm babbling now.
What day is next week?
Next week would be March the 1st. March the 1st.
Yeah.
So we do not meet on March the 1st, but we will meet on March the 8th. We are only taking 1 Tuesday off, and then the following Tuesday be here, okay? Here are your reading questions for Chapter 10. We're going to take a look at something else that's happening at the, oh, wait a minute. Why am I giving you, because then she'd have to get up and give, here, I guess I've got 2 extras because of my Aunt Natalie. Okay, there you go. We're going to look at explorers. After they discovered that this new place over across the sea was not the Indies, they started sending people there to find out what was there. And
I
that's
remember
what
the
we're going to do
last
about.
time in 4th grade when I was still in public school, when we learned about, we went through all the exploring and stuff like that, and our teacher was like, so, like, that's what she loves so much. She put so much work on us for the entire year, and it was like so whenever I hear this, I like,
oh no, it's the explorers! No, be calm, Andrew. We will spend 1 week on the explorers. I did make a little chart for you, though, at the bottom. It's hard to keep all these guys straight. You know, we got explorers from Spain, we got explorers from England, we got explorers from France, going all over the place. They're going to North America, South America. I don't expect you to memorize, but I just wanted you to kind of associate some of the names with the places, their destinations, to fill that in, because it can get a little overwhelming, all these names. But just the important part is to think of where they're going. Think of, you know what, I would challenge you, just get an atlas out. Just get a map of North and South America and think about all the places that are being visited in the 1500s. And it's amazing.
it's crazy.
When 100 years before, they didn't even know it was there.
It's crazy to think it's only been 600 years of everyone knowing about like
Yes, yes. Addison, did you want to say something?
Why didn't we learn about Columbus and like
He's going to be in the Explorers. They did mention him, but I brought him up. The hard thing about this book is all these things are connected to each other. All these things are happening at the same time. So she mentions something and then she brings it up later. Just like we've heard about Martin Luther, but we haven't read about the Reformation yet. It's like that. So I'm pretty sure Columbus is going to be the North, education, skip that, let's go to science. Oh yeah, even before, we're going to go back to Prince Henry the Navigator, even before Columbus. And she tells you again, they still thought of the world as flat. Please, please, no. Although, the average uneducated sailor, some of them might have thought that. Because it looks flat. But
didn't it never got out of educated?
I don't know, or maybe they just didn't believe it. Do you know there's a Flat Earth Society today?
He's a basketball player. He believes the Earth is flat.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if any of these people actually legitimately, there's just too much evidence, but
Just for like attention.
It's like so like out of anything you can believe. Like that doesn't. You can sail around the world.
yes. Yes, after we sailed around the world, who's also, which would be Magellan, and it's also in the next chapter. After we did that, we pretty much knew that you could go around and not fall off the edge. But most of them, Columbus never would have done. Remember, he was counting on the fact that the Earth was round because he thought we usually go to the Indies this way, but I think it would be easier and shorter to go this way. He was not correct, but it doesn't mean it wasn't doable. You can go this way and get there. You just have to go around the tip of South America and across the Pacific. So, go ahead, Addison. Oh, did you want to add something? No. So yes, you have 2 more weeks over break to finish your papers, which means that if you, by some freak, have not started yet because you didn't remember that 2 weeks means don't take 1 week off. Any story in this book is fair game. All right? It doesn't have to be the stories we read the first week, okay? Because you just read 4, I think, pretty doggone interesting stories, although Sir Lancelot's adventures get a little convoluted. Like what? Just one thing after another. The other ones are kind of more defined plots.
So what was the deal with the Green Knight?
Okay, let's talk about the Green Knight.
I'm doing the
Wait,
night.
Oh, wait a minute. Before we do that, I just want to ask, does anybody have a question on the paper? What you're doing? It's just like the one you did about Chaucer. You've just got that one back. So if I had any advice for you on your paper, you can use that advice, okay? You've got that sheet, and remember, you can do 2 characters. You can do the character, and if you think it might have a message, if you wanted to, you could even explore the setting, and the ambiance. Is it in a town or the woods, and why do you think it's set there? That sort of thing. But do you all know what I mean? You've got those sheets. Okay, so do you have any questions on the structure? Yes.
I always have a problem making it relevant.
Yes.
Okay.
That's difficult. If you are exploring a message, then presumably one can figure out how to do you agree with that message or don't agree with that message? Do you know what I mean? Should we learn from this message or should we not? If you're not doing that, say you're doing 2 characters. Well, presumably you have made some observations about the actions of those characters and maybe their moral fiber.
Like,
And
I'm
go ahead.
doing 2 characters, and I was planning on kind of I just want to hint at the message in the beginning
Yes.
and because it was pretty relevant.
And then you can say, this is a message we should heed, or this is a false message. I don't like this message. But yeah, so either one of those ways, you can take the actions or the morals of the characters and assess them in your conclusion, or you can assess the theme. Does that make sense, Addison? Does that help? Does that answer your question? I would like both kinds of parallelism, a strong verb, a simile, and alliteration. I'm not adding anything new. All right, it's the same thing I asked for last time. All right, do you guys have a question on any of those? We know what those are? Okay.
How many strong verbs do you want?
Just one. You go though. You want to make every verb a strong verb. You just do it. Yes.
And how much more are we supposed to read of?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and give you that. So for next time, so you have 2 weeks now, but it's the same amount of reading. You're going to finish book 2. There are 4 more chapters in book 2. There's more, but I'll let you write that down. And then I want you to start book 3 and read chapters 1 and 2. It's a total of 6 chapters, but it's roughly the same number of pages. I divided this up by number of pages.
Start book 3, chapter 1.
1 and 2. And those will be, so you're finishing book 2, and then you will read How the Holy Grail Came to Camelot and the First Adventures of Sir Galahad. All right, and then the next week we will finish it. So that's what you have. You're reading chapter 10 of Dorothy Mills. You're reading that section of King Arthur, and you're writing that paper. But you have 2 weeks. All right, let's talk about what's up with the Green Knight. Oh, but you look like you have a question.
Yeah, so wait, if he would have not taken the belt, or the green belt, like the next simple part, would he have died? Like, I'm just confused at that.
Okay, so does anybody want to comment on earlier in the story, or should we just get right to the end? Okay, awesome. So, although I am going to go back. So you said if he hadn't taken the belt at all?
Yeah.
Well, let's read what he says to him at the end. And I think, find it. That's a nice one. I like that one. She's really nasty. Okay. Okay. So he, just to remind you, so he, and Gawain flinches. He's like, I didn't flinch. Oh, you're not flinching. You got your courage. He's like, do it already. And he does it. And he says, then here is the blow I promised, cried the Green Knight, swinging his axe for the 3rd time. And now he struck truly, yet he aimed with such care that the blade only parted the skin at the side of his neck. But when Gawain had felt the wound and the blood over his shoulder, he sprang away in an instant, put on his helmet, drew his sword, set his shield before him, and said to the Green Knight, Now I have borne the blow, and if you strike again it is beyond our bargain, and I may defend myself, striking stroke for stroke. The Green Knight stood leaning on his axe. Gawain, he said, all the fierceness gone out of his voice, you have indeed borne the blow, and no other will I strike you. I hold you released of all claims now. If I had wished it, I might have struck you a crueler stroke and smitten your head off, as you smote off mine. The first blow and the second blow that struck you not, these were for promises kept, for the 1 kiss and the 2 kisses that my wife gave you in the castle, and you truly rendered to me. But the 3rd time you failed to give me back the gift. Remember, that was their bargain. Whatever I get when I hunt, I give to you. Whatever you win in the castle, you give to me. But he kept the lace. He kept the was it lace, silk? The girdle. They call it a girdle and some sort of belt. The 3rd time you failed, and therefore had the wound of me. You gave me the 3 kisses, but not the green lace. So I feel like he's insinuating, I nicked you because you didn't give it back to me. If he had not taken it at all, I feel like he would not have done anything to him. Like maybe there would have been just a 3rd, or just hit like right by his head.
So the whole plan of the Green Knight was to have somebody stop in his castle on the
Yes. So the Green Knight is Sir Bertilac. I don't know if they call him that in the story. The knight of the castle. They're one and the same. The Green Knight is the knight who hosted him, and it's a test. Gawain was known for his purity, his high level of purity, and so what do? We send the wife in. Let's see if we can get him to commit sin with me. No, just a kiss, 2 kisses. But then she gets him to take the lace. I think, John, if he had slept with her, if he had taken her up on her offer, because he would have proved himself a false knight. But the fact that he considered taking the lace but not reporting it, a minor thing. You know, at the end, he says, yeah, but you only did it to save your life. That's totally understandable. I'll nick you a little bit because you didn't tell me everything you got in the castle that day. But I feel like, this is my opinion, I can't prove it, I feel like if he had refused the lace completely, I feel like Sir Bertilac wouldn't have even nicked him. The Green Knight would have just, right next to his head, you know, just to put the fear into him. He's like, you're a good knight. You wouldn't fall for any of my wife's wiles. And yes, I sent her in there to test you. But I feel like the danger zone would have been if he had fallen for the wife. I feel like then he's not going away because he's broken. That's not what a knight does, you know. Because he treats it so, yeah, well, you just took it because you wanted to save your life. But you're still a good guy. You're still a really good guy. You didn't fall for my wife. You only did what was demanded of you by knighthood. You know, give her the little kiss, whatever, because that's what knights were supposed to do for the ladies. Does that make sense? Yeah, Addison.
Why? This whole story, he spends so much time and so much effort just to see if he can make him sin. This is so pointless.
I know. Okay, in this version, he says, the enchantment comes from the Lady of the Lake Nimue, the favorite of Merlin. She sent me to Camelot to test the truth of the renown that is spread abroad concerning the valor of the Knights of the Round Table. There is a famous poem. We have a poem of this. We don't know who wrote it. It's very long, and it's called, wait for it, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. That's what we call it. And the translation I have was translated by Tolkien from the Old English. And it says in that version that Morgana Le Fay set it up. That he was in her, not her pay exactly, but under her influence. And he didn't have any choice because she wanted to set up one of the Knights of the Round Table to fail. But he passed the test.
It just reminds me of like a reporter that goes to some person trying to get him to like mess up.
Yes, that's exactly. So it's apparently Sir Bertilac, aka the Green Knight. He's obviously under some enchantment. Hello, because you can cut his head off and he picks up his head and he leaves. And he's green. Who's green? I guess you can paint yourself green. What? Martians. But that it wasn't his choice to be enchanted and do this to them. That's implied in the stories. But yes, they go to an awful lot of trouble. Of course, we had that one story where Morgana Le Fay is whisking guys off that boat and put that one guy next to the edge of a well, hoping he'd fall. She goes to a lot of trouble. We're kidnapping people on a regular basis and imprisoning them, and poor Lancelot's in the dungeon, and she's a busy lady. She needs another hobby.
Is there a drugstore or something in the fair lady person?
Yes.
Didn't she like take
Isolde.
over her kingdom, his father's kingdom or something?
Yes,
and
she was mixed up in
killed
that.
His dad.
Yes, yes, because her husband, it was her Morgana Le Fay's husband, was at war with him. So that is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. There was a movie made of this last year. Don't watch it. Well, first of all, you shouldn't probably, because there's lots of lopping of heads. There's too many heads. I asked my son, should I watch it? And he said, Mom, there's heads. He said, even besides the one that we're expecting. And I'm like, oh. But I just shut my eyes. But they ruined the story. Because the point of the story is that Sir Gawain is a faithful knight, and he doesn't mess around with other people's wives. But he is tempted to save his own life. What we might say a venial sin. You know what I mean? But I just wanted to save my own life. But I did not take up with your wife. I don't do that.
And did you do that before?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, and I wasn't pleased. Because that if a story had a message, that would be the message that Sir Gawain rides out, and he is a true knight of the Round Table. In the poem, he has a 5-pointed star inside his shield, with a picture of Mary in the middle, and he's devoted to Mary, and she's his protectress. So there's a religious aspect in the poem, that this is a holy man, and he doesn't do that sort of thing. Our kitchen knight, though, somebody else learns a lesson, right? In this one, Gawain learns a lesson. He learns a lesson about maybe holding on to life too tightly and shaming himself because he's not as brave as he wanted to be. But I think the lady in the story of the Green Knight, Gawain learns that maybe he, is more. No, but in this Gareth story, he doesn't need to learn a lesson, does he? The lady needs to. The lady, Leoness, Lynette. Okay, she's a jerk. She's a snob, isn't she? You stink. You stink like a kitchen. I don't want you. You can't be any good. You've been in the kitchen. And he's actually Arthur's nephew, for crying out loud. But he doesn't. Why do you think he doesn't want to say for a year who he is?
I would say because, when I got from the message, a lot was prejudice. He wanted to see how they would treat him if they didn't know who he was. And if he came in as all of their brothers and son and nephew, he would be immediately treated well. But if he didn't, then he wanted to earn it.
He wanted to earn it. Nobody wants to. Well, brave, stout-hearted, intelligent people don't want to win things just because of who their family is, right? You want to do it. You want to say, "This was mine. I earned knighthood myself. I didn't just I was like, oh, well, you're my nephew, so I guess."
If I was her, though, I would be kind of upset that she had such a big mission or quest, and that they just sent. I wouldn't be mad at him, and I wouldn't be mean to him, but they did send a guy that's never been on a quest before. That they don't even know how good he is.
Yes.
So,
it's like going to a doctor and finding out that you're the first person they ever operated on. Okay, somebody's got to be first, but I don't want it to be me. Yeah. Lancelot, as we said, gets the runaround. He just fights and fights and fights and ends up in a dungeon and boy, but did you notice that the evil powers have it in for him? Go into that chapel and take the sword, go get the cloth, and then he comes out of the chapel, drop that sword, you have to. And he has to stick to his guns. He has to really say, no, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. She's like, oh, if you had dropped the sword, you would have been in my power, but now since you didn't obey me, because I was sent by Morgana Le Fay to trip you up. Lancelot. And then Tristram and Isolde. Very tragic, because it wasn't their fault. They are both enchantedly in love, and apparently, I don't know if there's no disenchant potion.
It said it was forever.
Did say it was forever. Nothing could break it. But if you were the second Isolde, this would tick you off. This would if you were his wife. You're like, yeah, but he keeps thinking about that other one. Like, I'm sorry, I'm enchanted. I don't know if that would help me as the wife if my husband just kept saying, sorry, enchanted, can't stop thinking about her.
Yeah, that would be so terrible. Like, especially, it's weird that he married someone with the same name.
It is.
It's like, I just want that what the heck? It's so weird. But then, yeah, I wish, why didn't they just tell the king? And, like, so that he knew that they weren't just, like, being false to him.
Do they know?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, eventually, how do they find out? Because it says that the nurse lady, all right.
Told him a couple years later.
Oh, she did say she told him? Okay, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would have had the guts to go to the king and say
It wasn't their
this.
fault.
It wasn't their fault.
So, I
And
mean,
he
was
did
like- was
leave.
exiled.
He left.
He was exiled, though.
Yes. So, this is a sad story. Look at which ones you're going to be reading. Oh, be on the lookout. I'll make this last thing and we'll stop. Be on the lookout for a story that should sound very familiar. Not that when you get into it, it's like, wait a minute. Because remember we talked about the Cambuscan and the brazen horse in the Chaucer storybook and how it was an Arabian Nights story. Wait a minute, the horse that you turn the pin and he goes wherever you want. You're going to run into another one. Remember, recycling stories in the Middle Ages was considered a-okay. But you gave it a new twist and you made it your own. So you will meet a story that should sound
We
very
still do
familiar.
that. Like with
We do.
original tales like Cinderella, there's a new Cinderella and stuff.
We do. We take stories and fan fiction is a big business, that people write fan fiction. Okay, I'm going to shut this off, but we got a couple minutes. I see one card down there, but I'm going to get on my phone and see if we can find out what's up with Leonardo da Vinci being right-handed, left-handed, and writing backwards. All right? Have a good break.